Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. 2 days ago, the Melaka State Legislative Assembly was dissolved after 4 of its members withdrew their support for the BN-Perikatan Nasional state government, which is led by Chief Minister Sulaiman. Now, the dissolution of the assembly has paved the way for fresh state elections, which must be held within 60 days. However, the possibility of a state of emergency in Melaka has been raised in order to postpone snap polls, as had been done in Sarawak. Now, opinions are split over this. Should Melaka go to the polls to resolve the political crisis, or would placing the state under a localized emergency be the better option? Our first guest tonight is Datuk Muhammad Sofi Abdul Wahab. He's the assembly person for Durian Tunggal in Melaka. He's also deputy chief for Amanah Melaka. Good evening. Datuk Sofi, we understand there were divisions within Pakatan on the support for the breakaway 4. I'm just wondering what Pakatan's position is now with regards to what it wants to happen next. Hi, Datuk Sofi, can you hear me?
Yeah. Okay. Actually, as everybody knows that Pakatan Harapan and 4 ADUN that are selected from the government have a clearly majority with 15 seats, and the chief minister cannot easily dissolve the ADUN because we have a clearly majority, which is 15 versus 13. And as what our chairman, PH chairman, says that we will review this condition and we will decide to bring it to court on this issue, because when CM decided to dissolve the ADUN, actually he is lost the majority already. So he are not eligible to advise TYT to dissolve the ADUN.
Okay, Sofi, we are going to be speaking to a legal expert later on about precisely whether this move by the governor was constitutional. But I want to ask you, why is it that Pakatan does not want a poll at this point in time, or any other kind of resolution? Why have you chosen to kind of, as it were, reverse this decision to dissolve the assembly?
Okay, because as I told you just now, that we have, the four ADUN, which is from a government before, and we have 11 seats here. And as I told you just now, that we have a clearly majority, which is we have 15 seats. And it's very risky to have polls or state election, because as you know that we are still facing the big problem related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I think everybody agreed that this is not the time to have state election, because we have experience during the Sabah state election that after the Sabah state election, the pandemic is spiked, and we cannot control the pandemic because of everybody went to Sabah to have the to involve in the campaign and return back to Semenanjung, and the pandemic actually risen very high at that time. So it is very risky to have a state election, as I told you just now. And
right.
In terms of a legality, we feel that we have a clear majority at the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us. We appreciate your time. We're going to move now to another state. Another member of the Melaka State Assembly, Datuk Ginie Lim, is the assembly person for Machap, Jaya. She's also the chief of PKR Alo Gajah Division. Ginie, is an emergency to avoid elections at this moment a desirable outcome for you and perhaps from your constituents' point of view?
Ginie, can I refer to you a statement made by Shamsul Iskandar, I think the PKR comms chief. It says that the PKR rejects an election. It also rejects an emergency and wants cabinet, the federal cabinet, to kind of intervene. Why is it? I mean, what would that resolve? I mean, you'd be back to, I know Sofi just mentioned that 15, but 15 is still a very slim majority. It would be a very unstable government. And is it clear what the form of cooperation will be between Idris and his faction of UMNO and Pakatan Harapan?
I'm sorry, I have no preview to the discussions that have been held, probably just recently. But in principle, we know that the emergency is going to, hold back a lot of measures on check and balance on those who are in power. But for elections, as I said just now, it has to be done in a proper way. I mean, taking the experience or lessons from Sabah, I think, we might need to go through a more proper managed election if you want to ensure the health safety of the public.
Right.
This is our main concern. Yeah.
I'm sure that the past few days have been quite harrowing, or caused a lot of hand-wringing among the politicians in Melaka. But I'm just wondering what your constituents, have you had a chance to speak to your constituents, and how are they responding to the recent political developments?
Well, I would say it's quite a mixed feeling. Well, I can't speak for the whole of Melaka, because my constituents, Machap Jaya, is actually a rural area that consists of 3 Sauda settlements. So, all out of total voters, 20% are working outside Melaka, JB, KL, and Singapore. Generally, they are angry with this move, that, with this kind of situation, that the Melaka State Assembly is being dissolved, and there might be a possibility of a state election. And I think the most, unwanted scenario is an emergency. So people are very angry, but of course they are very torn. If you're going to have an election, whether people will come back to vote, whether people will mobilize supporters. So this is also the main concern. But people are excited, and on the other hand, that Pakatan Harapan is going to get back into power. I mean, not to say that we agree this kind of hoping or jumping to party, but we are the coalition that's been voted in the last election. So people are really looking forward to it, but probably this kind of thing it happens in such a way that it's not a way that we want to see it, and also in happening at this time. So
right, Ginie, I want to ask you, because Ginie, you were quoted in the press that you weren't in favor of Pakatan supporting the, as it were, the Perikatan National rebels, the 4 who left, Idris and the others. What was your thinking then? What would have been a better solution at that point in time in your thinking?
Well, a solution to what? Sorry, I didn't quite get
to the crisis. I mean, the crisis was that there was a withdrawal of support. Should Pakatan have just stayed back? Because Pakatan actually did turn up at that press conference and show support for Idris. You seem to have reservations about that.
No, I really have no idea what's going on in UMNO, but of course we hear it from our friends that the internal crisis is getting from bad to worse, and that's what happens when there's no space, for the four. They are not just ADUN, but they are exposed. So it's quite a weird situation where they are exco, and also the federal government is an UMNO government and the state government is an UMNO government, and they couldn't handle their internal crisis. Anyway, it's not our problem, because we would like to be in power because we were mandated by the people, but there's no way we can get them over, because we have nothing to offer them but the mandate from the people. So it's their internal problem that lead to this crisis, and we didn't expect this to happen, because we are supposed to have our state assembly sidang DUN supposed to be by end of this month, that we will be having budget tabling. So we didn't expect this to happen. I mean, if it had to happen, well, maybe you can go to the sidang DUN to have a vote against the budget or any kinds of motion that can show the support for the chief minister. So apparently UMNO has failed to control their own state assembly person in this way, and secondly, they fail again to embrace the spirit of MOU that's been signed at the federal level, or embrace the spirit of the commitment to have the anti-hopping law, and it was signed by their very own prime minister from UMNO. It's signed by prime minister from UMNO, but they at the state level has violated or they have went against all this. I mean, they could have a choice, not to dissolve the state assembly. They could have choose other way, like happened in other states, like Perak, for example. So we have a lot of questions, same as you. I don't have much answer.
Well, thank you so much, for joining us today and sharing your perspective on this matter. Datuk Ginie Lim, the Assembly Person for Machap Jaya in Melaka. We're going to take a quick break, but more on the Melaka political crisis in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to consider this.
Ayuh keluarga Malaysia, kita bulatkan tekad dan bersatu hati untuk terus memelihara serta mempertahankan kedaulatan negara. Sebagai keluarga Malaysia yang besar, kita harus bertoleransi dalam semua perkara. Hormat menghormati serta mengekalkan perpaduan rakyat yang berbilang kaum, agama dan bangsa, serta integrasi nasional silang budaya adalah tunjang kekuatan kita sebagai sebuah negara bangsa yang berjaya. Umpama selembar benang dikait, ditenun dan dijalin, akhirnya menjadi kain yang sempurna indah.
Amanah di tangan kita. Adat, budaya dan semangat menjadi kesinambungan perpaduan tanah air yang tercinta. Berteraskan adab yang terpahat di jiwa dan raga. Marilah bersama kita membina negara Malaysia.
Untuk memastikan Malaysia ada ke depan
dan maju. Induknya adalah Melayu.
Balik kepada support system. This is orang yang membuat polisi.
Kalau itu yang dikehendaki, fine. Mungkin kita berbeza pandangan.
Tapi kita mempunyai kuasa yang boleh menentukan budaya di masa hadapan.
Polisi yang mesra wanita sudah tentu dia akan datang daripada pemimpin wanita.
Sama Mahat tahfiz Jawaban.
Bila sentuh soal berita, tiada masa untuk tunggu. Kepada anda kami bawakan fakta, susulan dan kupasan yang terkini. Tiada drama dan tiada pengulangan. Usah tunggu lama-lama. Awani 7.45 lebih awal dari biasa.
Ayuh keluarga Malaysia, kita bulatkan tekad dan bersatu hati untuk terus memelihara serta mempertahankan kedaulatan negara. Sebagai keluarga Malaysia yang besar, kita harus bertoleransi.
Hi, thank you so much for staying with Sharaad and I on Consider This. Let's continue our discussion about the political crisis in Melaka, which has now led to the dissolution of the State Assembly and snap elections, which need to be held within 60 days. We have lawyer New Sinu joining us on the line now. Sinu, what was the dissolution of the Melaka State Legislative Assembly by the governor? Was that constitutional?
Hi, yes, I do think that it's constitutional. It's very clear in the state constitution, Melaka State Constitution, that the Yang Independent Negeri has the discretion to either withhold his consent or agree to a dissolution of the State Legislative Assembly. And there are some, statements out there by politicians saying that the CM had ceased to command confidence of the majority and is not in the position to advise the Yang Independent Negeri to dissolve. Well, I don't think those views are right, because it's also very clear in the state constitution that once the chief minister ceases to command confidence of the majority, then he may request the ruler to dissolve the legislative assembly. And that's precisely what the ruler had done.
Sinu, is there any recourse for those who are unhappy with the situation, who don't want to see either an election or emergency rule? I mean, some people want to take this to court, others want to take it to the palace. Can they get relief?
I don't think they would find too much success by going to the court, because Musa Aman did that, I think, last year during the state Sabah election. He tried to stop the state Sabah state election, but he was unsuccessful. He tried to obtain an order by the court to stay the dissolution of the state legislative assembly, but the court held that he can't do that, and it was on quite similar grounds as well, I would imagine. And the circumstances back then was also quite similar in that there is a pandemic, but there still is a pandemic. And I don't think there's any recourse to go to the Yang Dipertuan Agong. I think that move is purely political, because the Yang Dipertuan Agong, His Majesty has no jurisdiction over what happens in the Melaka state. So the decision lies with the Yang Dipertuan Negeri, and that's really something that they don't. I don't think they'll find any success in court or with the YDPA.
Well, Senior, some quarters have called for emergency rule to postpone the elections in Melaka, similar to in Sarawak. Can I ask you where you stand on this debate?
No, I disagree with that. I think that democracy should not be suspended through an emergency when there are ways to hold an election during a pandemic. I'm not a medical expert, but some things seem obvious to me that the Election Commission could do. The Election Commission could conduct the election and mitigate the risk of the pandemic by holding it in a manner which is safe. They can consider, for example, postal voting, expanding those who are able to vote using posts. They can consider early voting. They can consider extending the polling day to more than a day so that there will not be a concentration of crowd. Certain regulations for the conduct of election and registration of voters will probably have to be amended, but that is something that they can do within 60 days. What is disappointing to me is that we have not seen or heard any effort whatsoever by the Election Commission in the past 2 years to prevent this, to facilitate. They could facilitate election during the pandemic, but we haven't seen anything done by them to allow this to happen. And I think they seem to be very fixed in their ways that an election must be done as if it is normal times. So I think that is negligence by the Election Commission.
Thank you so much. That was lawyer New Sin Yu there. And let's have Dr. Bridget Welsh join us now. She is with the Asia Research Institute at University of Nottingham, Malaysia. Bridget, if Melaka does go to the polls, what political alignments might be revealed ahead of GE15? I'm just wondering what you think we might see in terms of political cooperation.
Yes, I think I will answer that, Melisa, but I do want to sort of respond to Sinyu's comments just now, in that I'm of the view that I think there are other factors that I think do call for the need for a review of whether or not this election should take place. Number one, Undi 18 has not been through, so youth are going to be excluded in this election in that context. We also see a situation where, you know, based on my observations of what happened in Sabah, the nature of personal politics in terms of exchange of gifts and in terms of the travel into the area, these are things that are very difficult to regulate. And I think they exacerbate the health risk. And so while we know that most of Melaka, 90% of Melaka is vaccinated, it's the people coming from outside. And remember, vaccination doesn't stop the virus, it just stops the effects of the virus. So I think that, you know, I think with the ground, the way elections take place do present health risks, and these health risks become economic risks for this region, which has already been quite badly hit by the pandemic in terms of factory closings and others. So I slightly differed with Sinyu on that context. Now to your question, Melisa, which is the issue of political realignments. I think what we're really seeing in this contest, if it evolves, is a focus on the Malay vote. And what we see is that one of the reasons some people would like to go forward with this election is particularly for UMNO. They feel that they can win back the seats that they have traditionally won in this area and basically wipe out parts of Bersatu and also to have a dent in parts of the seats that were won by Amanah and even potentially challenge PKR. I think UMNO, to a certain degree, has a sense of too high expectations, and it's not fully cognizant of some of the divisions within it. But I think that this issue of the Malay vote will be very important. The whole election is going to be different in the sense that we do see on the ground partisan loyalty will be very important. And of course, this goes to the point I was raising earlier. This will mean that this will be patronage-based, personal gifts, because the focus will be on the Malay vote.
Bridget, what are the chances that if we don't have an election and an emergency rule is imposed, that the very same people, Sulaiman, the former chief minister, along with Rauf, will be in charge? Will this please UMNO HQ? Zayed seems to is said to be on the side of Rauf and Sulaiman. How does this all play out in the sense of, you know, UMNO dynamics?
So first part of that, Sharaad, is that, you know, there are solutions that could potentially be worked out as some sort of deal or other things, some administrative procedures. Perhaps there is some middle ground between an emergency and holding an election. I think there needs to be a bit of creative thinking outside of the box and some sort of solutions that resolve and give a bit more time to prepare the Election Commission to carry out this election safely for postal voting and to bring in young people. Now, in terms of UMNO, I see what we see as a situation where I think that you have to remember there are many factions in UMNO, and part of that played out in why the government fell. So there were party factionalism, personality issues that were at play, but with multiple parties, UMNO being one of the most pivotal in Melaka. Those will not be resolved by the election. But in terms of UMNO HQ as in Zahid, as opposed to UMNO HQ as in Ismail Sabri, I think that many people on the Zahid side would be quite happy with continuing the previous government, and I think many of these local personalities are quite powerful. What is going to happen, however, is that because of the many people who jump, both in Bersatu and UMNO, 4 in total, what you see is a situation where there will be new people that will be played in. And, this is going to be a test of the presidency of UMNO, because they will be able to be trying to influence who the candidates are as a precursor to what happens at the national stage.
Yeah, Bridget, about that, I mean, we already hear, Zahid saying that they won't work with Bersatu in the polls in Melaka and so on. Do you think that whether they go to the polls or not, all these statements have a potential for destabilizing the federal government?
No question. I think there are 3 sources of destabilization. The first of which is the relationship between UMNO and Bersatu, which you've highlighted in that context. And I think the other source is that it will exacerbate the tensions within UMNO itself, and basically pit Zahid against Ismail Sabri or other actors in UMNO. And the final issue is that there's no question that this will put tension on the MOU between the relationship between Pakatan Harapan and the current government. It's very difficult to go into an election when you're supposed to be cooperating. And while I think there are some indications that there'll be a bit more traction maybe next week with some meetings and so forth, I think the fact is there has been very little movement on the MOU so far, and an election is a sure thing to put a lot of strain on that relationship.
Right. Bridget, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. That was Dr. Bridget Welsh of the Asia Research Institute. And that is all we have for you on this episode of Consider This. But before, again, we leave you tonight, a reminder, as always, that you can get the latest news and information on COVID-19 vaccines at astroawani.com, as well as the Astro Awani app. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Good night.